Hello, everyone. This is Steve Barrett, the editorial director of PRWeek US. Delighted to be joining you here at the PRWeek Global Awards. We've got a great panel discussion ahead of us, and we're going to talk about the great return and beyond. I was in Manhattan yesterday from my Brooklyn home, and it really felt like the city was getting back to normal a bit, and the subways were filling up, which I don't know if it's a good thing, but it's going to happen. We've all, we've all missed the office and convening with people, but certain things have changed. We've all been working from home for over 12 months. Well, not all of us, as we'll find out, but a lot of people have. So what does that mean for the industry? What does that mean for employee engagement? We're really going to get into that discussion, which has been supported by Zeno. So thank you for that. And we've got Laura Duda, who's SVP and CCO at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And we've got Molly McCabe, who's VP Communications, Community, Diversity and Inclusion at Ulta Beauty. And we've got Mark Shadle, who's the MD of the Global Corporate Affairs at Zeno Group. So welcome everybody to this chat. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Steve.
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah, now I think we've got two in the office and one at home, and one has been in the office most of the time. The others, I think Mark is sort of coming back, and Molly, you yet to go back. So we've got a really good mix here. Let's start with you, Laura, because you were saying you've only actually really been out for 3 weeks, and you're based in Akron, Ohio. And I guess that maybe that's a little easier than if we're in New York or Chicago or San Francisco. But tell us about it. What is the new normal of the workplace going to look like? And what are the issues that you're considering both as a communicator, but also as a business?
So I think, Steve, it's almost kind of like we focus on the people returning to work, which is a certain segment, but actually we have over 60,000 associates, and most of them kind of never left. They're working in factories, they're working in retail stores. We're, as part of the transportation industry, we're an essential service. So most of our people never left or left only very briefly. So that's one thing to think about. And I read an interesting article in Slate the other day, and the title was, "It's been hard not to roll my eyes. Essential workers are already over your whining about returning to work." And I think we do. Yeah, I think we do. It's an interesting article, and it puts in perspective for a lot of companies, the people doing the actual work are still out there doing it and haven't stopped. However, there are the office associates and employees that are also very important. And I think this is a big shift. It was a big shift to leave. We're a traditional in the office kind of company. And for that sector of the workforce, it was a big deal to leave. It's going to be a big deal to come back. We've been in a hybrid where when you need to be here, you're here. When you don't need to be here, you can be at home. I think that I think when we all left, we thought it would be 3 weeks, and yep, now it's been over a year. So I think there are going to be some reintroduction issues coming back in for that slice of the workforce. But we do see a lot of benefit to being together. We think flexibility is really important, but I think feels like there's about 10 people in the building. I look forward to a lot more interaction in the future.
Yeah, and look, whilst we've been at home, we have been working. So, more than ever, actually, probably longer hours than ever. It's probably return to the office is probably a better phrase, isn't it? And certainly have new respect for all the essential workers who've been keeping us going, and I hope that persists afterwards. I hope that's one of the things that does persist. Molly, your company's in a slightly different situation, not so much of a return to work, although I'm sure that some of the staffers have in closer to the production part. How are you approaching this big moment? Because it is a big moment, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you and Mark and Laura to talk about, yes, a really important issue. And I agree with so much of what Laura said. In our business, we've in many ways experienced 3 different experiences. One, our distribution centers have been open the entire time, luckily, and performing really critical essential services for our business and for our customers. Our stores were closed for a period of time, and so that was obviously something we've never navigated as a business that we had to quickly figure out. And now, luckily, they're back and operating safely, and that's just been a wonderful transition back. But for our corporate associates, of which I am one, we have been working remotely in large part this entire time. Our office is open. People can go in if they choose to, but we just haven't seen a lot of associates doing that. And so we're preparing for September to be the time that we have more of a formal return. But frankly, we've been spending a lot of time setting expectations that that will look different than it did before, that we have to acknowledge that we've all been through something we never have, and that our employees' expectations of work and life have been changed. And that as their employer and as the employer of future talent, we have to be prepared to offer flexibility in a different way. We were pretty progressive in our flexibility offering prior to the pandemic, but we are in the process now of really rethinking that even further, just to make sure that we're, again, where we need to be as it relates to attracting the top talent that we need to remain the beauty retailer that we want to be in this competitive industry.
Yeah, Mark, you've got a great perspective because you are seeing the lens not just through a global agency, but also all your global clients. So you're seeing it from different parts of the world, from different clients, as well as Zeno. So what's your perspective on that? And what do employers want? Because from their employees, and employee engagement has totally changed, hasn't it? It's become more informal in some ways, and some of those things maybe are going to persist afterwards.
Yeah, I think the word that Molly used is really important, and that's expectations. And it's really hard to get that those expectations calibrated between the employer and the employee, because so much has changed. It's almost as if there's a brand new compact, between the two sides. And everyone knows that there's going to be something different on the other side of this, but they don't know exactly what it is. And I think that this period up until now has been as difficult as it's been for a lot of companies. It's been an opportunity for them to test some things that they might not have tested before and to venture into some new areas. We've seen people become Zoom experts, that might not have even wanted to venture online. I will say we did some recent research, and we'll make this public in a while, but we did some research where we had actually asked employees about this return. And 7 out of 10 of them said that they don't want the same environment as they saw pre-COVID, right? They expect that there's going to be some sort of change, and they want that change to be on their terms, which is, sort of an interesting power dynamic when you think of how employers deal with employees. And at the same time, you're starting to hear CEOs signal what their expectations are for people coming back to the office. So we know it's going to be something different. And we know the way that people communicate and what they expect from employers is going to be a different environment. I just think that, we've talked about how there isn't a playbook. I think it's more that we're going to have to be very sensitive in the nuances across demographics, across market segments, across countries. And that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge of all. Yeah,
because I think people are going to be quite nervous about going back into an office. I think I went back into our office just a couple of times over the past year. It's like walking in the Marie Celeste. There are printed pages on the wall from the March 2020 issue, that we were preparing at the time. It's like walking into a snapshot in time, and people aren't going to be used to commuting and being around people anymore. So it is going to be different. And a lot of people, Laura, have some people have moved, right? They've moved out of the cities, they've moved home, or some people have moved to Costa Rica or whatever. When that sort of reconvenes, are you going to have a more flexible approach to where your team is based? And if so, if they were in New York and they get that nice sort of bump in salary for living in New York, and now they're living in Akron, Ohio, or whatever, are you still going to pay that? And then if you have to get them to the head office, you're going to pay the expenses. All these sort of practical issues as well, aren't they?
Yeah, so we're actually, interestingly, in the middle of a study with an outside consulting firm on, we're calling it Workplace Reimagined, because I think similar to what Mark said, everyone knows there's something else on the other side of this. And to go back to exactly the way it was before is very naive and not possible. And to just sort of guess what it is not possible. So we've done surveys, we've done benchmarking, we've asked our own people about the workplace they desire in the future. We've asked leaders what they desire. We've triangulated that against other experiences. I'll use an example. Like many years ago, way before I came to Goodyear, in the early days, almost as part of the factory environment, even office employees, there was a bell that told you when to go to your break. There was a bell that told you when to come back. There was a bell that told you when to go to lunch, and so on and so forth. That's the way things used to be. Now we fast forward to now, we would never go back to the bell. Like, that's just ridiculous. So I think to think that we would go back to exactly 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 in a seat every day is also unrealistic. But we also know that there are things that you get from being together that may be somewhat intangible. Hallway conversations, bumping into people in the cafeteria. There are things that happen together that aren't going to happen when you're just clicking from one Zoom meeting to another. And we know that flexibility is a preference, but we also have to balance that with being our best as a company, which probably means, some togetherness, maybe not to the same level, but we're actively working, studying to design the new normal before it just happens to us, which is the other possibility.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point in going back to an office and then everyone's sitting there doing Zoom calls, is there? That's just a kind of waste. Or everyone going back, but only on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we've got an empty office on Monday, Friday. Molly, women in the workforce have been particularly impacted over the past 14 months. We've seen many women either put their careers on hold or actually leave the workforce, and the increased pressures of working from home, homeschooling, most household management, which still falls to women, in a lot of cases. How do you manage that? The PR profession is 70% women. How do you manage that part of it, and how do you see the team returning after this big hiatus?
Yeah, it's a great question. From our perspective, 92% of our employees are female. So we are always thinking about the full diversity of our workforce, but clearly gender diversity is a big element of what we're balancing. And so that has been very present for us, as not only our corporate employees who have been managing the kids at home during remote schooling, both fathers and mothers. So we've tried to think, listen to our employees, what are their needs and what can we practically apply? And as Laura said, that through the lens of flexibility and also understanding that we were navigating something incredibly difficult. We needed to really deliver on the results for our business. And so we've implemented a few things that we've gotten continued good feedback on. One is we have a no meeting space from 12 to 1 every day. And that really stemmed from people had their kids at home and they needed to just ensure that they had a minute to give them lunch and to give themselves lunch. And that really, a small gesture, but has held. People have really stayed dedicated to it, and it has meant a lot to people. And the other thing we've done is in the afternoons on Fridays, we don't have meetings. Again, because of this back-to-back sort of meeting culture that the virtual world does make even easier, that has been really critical. But I'll tell you, even with those two things in place, because this has gone on so long, we're continuing to push ourselves to say what else might be out there to ensure that our associates' well-being is at the forefront of our mind. And then obviously that everything I just mentioned applies to our corporate associates, but we're very cognizant of how that feels equitable for our store associates and our distribution associates who obviously can't use those same tools for their own well-being. And so thinking about things that would apply to them. An example there this year is we closed on Thanksgiving for the first time this year. And that was, a meaningful decision that we made. That was just time that we wanted our associates obviously to have back with their families. So very top of mind for us.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, there are 4 generations in the workplace. We've got baby boomers through to Gen Z. how are those different groups going to be approached? Because, you know, someone who's Gen Z and might have been living in a room share or on their own and be isolated is very different to a parent who might be living in the suburbs, et cetera, et cetera. What are the differences between the different generations of employees?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, Steve, is that the importance really lies in those nuances that I talked about earlier, and looking and at least being first, I think it's acknowledging that that exists in the first place, and that these generations, as much as they overlap, there are some values that they hold as being more different than the others, and really thinking very carefully so that you don't isolate or alienate any of those groups. You know, I think that there seems to be this idea that, well, if you are at the younger age of the spectrum, you're more interested in social justice or in diversity or in, and I think that's not necessarily true. There are values that do extend across the entire spectrum, but I think each of the groups wants to see it come to life in a different way. And they also, I think, look a bit differently at the opportunities that they have in front of them. And once again, people at the older end of the spectrum don't want to feel as if their careers are over and they are somehow being sunsetted, right? They want to feel like they can still have the opportunity to offer and bring something new, you know, to that job. And, you know, this is the part that I think companies are really wrestling with, is how do you convey a consistent message and a consistent story and a consistent brand across an entire organization, knowing that you have all these different slices of a population that you need to think about. And I have to imagine, just both for Laura and for Molly, you know, you've got to wrestle with this, you know, all the time.
Yeah, it's you know, the younger employees, when I was a young journalist, I'm sure young PR professionals, you learn from listening to how other people do their job, don't you? And those older employees are great mentors, and you hear how they do it, hear how they deal with a client or deal with an issue, and you miss all that when you're working from home. Laura, you mentioned it earlier about this people on the manufacturing, you know, in the frontline essential services being already sick of this great return. It's like, yeah, we've been here all along. How are you going to, because when everyone does come back to the office, there's bound to be a bit of a hullabaloo about it. How are you going to make sure you don't you alienate half the workforce, but whilst also transitioning the rest of the workforce back to their normal environment?
Well, I think we're just taking a thoughtful and gradual approach. I mean, we've been at this. There have been several opportunities when, you know, case counts were low, when we thought about, do we just bring people back in? And we decided, you know, we've been, and I want to give compliments to our office-based workforce. We went from never working remotely to going home over a weekend and working entirely remotely. Yeah. So it's been quite a transition, and I think we have been very impressed with the sort of the resilience and ability and technical aptitude of our associates to do that. I don't think it changes a lot for the folks in our factories, for the folks in the retail stores. We're not planning to make it too celebratory. It's just, you know, let's get back to some semblance of normal with additional levels of flexibility built in, which, by the way, those people in the factories don't always have, and the people in the retail stores don't always have. But I don't think life changes for them again. I think they've sort of been staying the course, keeping our customers served, keeping consumers served, and then you know, their colleagues in office-based roles are going to return to the workplace on some frequency, and life will go on and will be better for all this.
Yeah, let's hope so. Molly, the role of the CEO and the C-suite's been interesting, hasn't it? I mean, when you're on a Zoom call and you're the CEO and you're doing a town hall, everyone can kind of see, oh, look, that's where they live, you know, or that's what they've got. Oh, look at that picture or whatever. And it kind of personalizes the relationship a little bit in a way that probably hadn't happened before. And I get the sense that some CEOs have loved that, actually, and that they might continue that more personalized approach to employee engagement. What's your views on that?
Yeah, we have a very interesting moment in time happening from that perspective, as well as we have a CEO transition happening, a long planned internal succession where we have a long successful CEO who is becoming our executive chair, and our president is becoming CEO as of just early June. And so it's been just incredibly interesting. And yeah, I would say both of our CEOs right now and the rest of our C-suite team have really embraced it. I give them all the credit in the world of continually thinking about how they can use this as an opportunity to engage with our associates in new ways across all three areas of our business. And so a couple things that we've done. One, we quickly instituted two things: a weekly video from our CEO, our current CEO, Mary, so that the entire organization was hearing from her weekly. And that has been incredibly helpful. And we did that right away, really in the height of the crisis, but kept it going, because while we weren't, having updates like furloughing associates or closing stores, really important business updates. So we've kept that up. In addition, bringing all of our officers together with some frequency. Again, it started weekly. Now we're doing it every other week. But just another way to bring that leadership team together and connect them. And then when we were talking about the generational differences, it reminded me, the virtual world has given us really fun opportunities to just connect in ways from an associate engagement standpoint that we might not have before. And so we've done a ton of that. And our CEO and other C-level leaders have been a part of that. So we just did a fireside chat around generational differences. So we had a panel of our own associates representing each of the generations we have in the workforce, and had just a really fun conversation about what that means. And so we've done all sorts of things like that our C-level team has engaged in.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
They've been wonderful.
Good stuff, and long may that continue. Mark,
Yes.
we didn't just have a COVID, a pandemic and a recession, but we also had big societal issues. We had a very divisive election. We had the storming of the Capitol. It's been an incredible year all round. In the corporate world, brands and corporations are kind of expected to step up and make statements, or people want to know what they believe in, whether they're going to engage with them or work for them. So employees want to know what their company stands for. How have you been approaching that part of it as a corporate, a senior counselor from the corporate point of view?
Well, once again, we see that expectation word come up again, right? There's this rising expectation from society at large that CEOs will have something to say. Executives will be out there having a point of view on news of the day. And then I think employees want to see that too. And they take some pride in the fact that their CEO is out there on issues that matter to them. But I also think that we're trying to help clients think through being deliberate about that and not following the parade. So not every issue is an issue that you need to weigh in on. Not every issue is an issue that you need to be public about and take a public stance. I think that being more thoughtful about them, it's difficult, but being more thoughtful about them, I think actually increases your level of trust and also increases the level of resonance that you have with your own workers. So one of the things that we have been talking to clients about is using technology and using research, not to ask employees to vote on what they think, the company's position should be, but at least to do some degree of a pulse check. Right? Not wait until those issues happen, but get out there early, do a pulse check, and get a sense for what employees think about issues of the day, so that when management decides this is one that matters to us, they'll have that perspective and be able to use it to their advantage. Again, it's not an issue of everybody gets in and votes as much as why go into it cold. I think there's too much of an assumption that people can make in positions of power that they assume that they know exactly what everyone in their company thinks. And if you are a company that is operating in 180 countries around the world and has 60 or 100,000 employees, I guarantee you there are differences in points of view within your company. And at this point in time, with labor shortages and difficulty in recruitment, you can't afford to alienate large groups of workers. So again, it's all about being deliberate and thoughtful and choosing the moments that really benefit society, benefit the company, benefit your employees.
And you need good PR counsel, both internally and from your agencies. So yeah, so it's good for PR pros. We're out of time. Just one quick go around. What's the one thing that's top of mind for your employee engagement in the rest of 2021 and moving into 22? First up, Laura, very quickly.
We are currently in the process of acquiring a competitor. So the successful close of that transaction and successful integration into our business is our top issue.
Yeah, it's normal business carries on, doesn't it? So yeah, how about you, Molly?
Feedback, we're implementing a new pulse survey mechanism, so continuing to get feedback and quick action for our employees.
And Mark?
I mentioned the research that we have done, and one of the things that came out of that we are focusing is this idea that there's a large number of employees out there who are happy in their jobs, and that same number of employees are willing to hop. Like, despite the fact that they are happy in their jobs, they are looking for opportunities. And if they don't see those opportunities within the company they work for, they are more interested and eager than ever to find it someplace else. So we think that that's an opportunity for clients to really think carefully about that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Mark. Great discussion about the great return and beyond that. And we can't solve everything in 25 minutes, but there's been some great insights there. And now we'll get you back to the awards, the big winners, and hope you enjoy the show.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Steve.
Thank you.